Layla moved into the apartment on a Tuesday, a fourth-floor unit in an aging building. It wasn't perfect, but it was affordable. The previous tenant had left in a hurry. Unusual, the landlord had admitted, but nothing sinister. People moved on. Life happened. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, though she only needed 1. The extra room sat empty, its door closed. She had no use for it. The first night was uneventful. A long day of unpacking left her exhausted, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The second night, she woke to the sound of shuffling, a faint, dragging noise, like something shifting across the floor. Disoriented, she listened, heart pounding, but the sound never came again. The third night, she found the door to the extra room open. She was sure she had closed it. Perhaps the latch was faulty, or the draft from the windows had nudged it ajar. She pulled it shut again, making a mental note to check it in the morning. By the end of the week, she started noticing other things. Objects, slightly out of place. The bathroom light on when she was certain she had turned it off. The unmistakable sensation of movement in her peripheral vision. She told herself it was stress, a new environment, the exhaustion of settling in. The mind played tricks when it was overwhelmed. Then came the knocking. Always at exactly 3:12 a.m., a soft, deliberate rapping from inside the extra room. Not frantic, not aggressive, just patient. She didn't check. Not that night, not the next. A week passed, and the knocking continued, rhythmic and unchanging. She began to dream of the room, strange for a space she never entered, but in sleep, she found herself standing in its center, the air thick and unmoving. The walls were bare, stripped of paint, as if something had clawed at them for years. A single chair sat in the corner, facing her. She would wake with the distinct impression that someone had been sitting there, waiting for her to arrive. The following morning, she discovered the extra room's door wide open. Inside, the chair from her dream was there. She hadn't put it there. She had never even owned a chair like that. She tried not to panic, tried to explain it. Maybe the previous tenant had left it behind, tucked away in the closet, and she hadn't noticed until now. Maybe she had brought it in and simply forgotten, except she hadn't. That night, she locked the door. At 3:12 a.m., the knocking came again. This time it was louder. She lay frozen, staring at the ceiling, willing herself not to move. The knocking continued, steady and insistent. Then it stopped. A long silence stretched through the apartment, then the sound of the doorknob turning, slowly, methodically. The lock held. She didn't sleep. The next day, she had the locks changed. She considered leaving, but something irrational, something she couldn't name, kept her rooted. A part of her needed to know, needed to understand. She placed a heavy chair under the doorknob, barricading it shut. That night, she sat awake, staring at the door. At 3:12 a.m., the knocking came again. Then the handle twisted. Then the chair, the heavy, solid chair, began to slide away from the door, as if something on the other side was pulling it back. She ran, not stopping to grab her keys, not pausing to shut the front door behind her. Barefoot, breathless, she sprinted down the hallway to the apartment below, hammering at the door until a groggy, confused neighbor opened it. She didn't return alone. The landlord accompanied her. They entered cautiously, every light on, but the apartment was silent. The extra room's door stood open. Inside, the chair was gone. The landlord said nothing for a long time, just rubbed his jaw, staring at the empty space. Then, with a sigh, He admitted something he hadn't told her before. The previous tenant had lived alone too. A quiet man, nothing strange about him, until he started talking about something in the extra room. He had become obsessed with it, leaving in the middle of the night, refusing to sleep inside. He stopped paying rent. One day, he was just gone. They had never found him. She moved out the next day. Months later, a friend mentioned that the unit had been listed again. Someone new had moved in. She never asked what happened to them. She never wanted to know. Mason never picked up hitchhikers. That was an unspoken rule, something his father had drilled into him since he was a kid. But that night, as he drove down the empty, rain-slick highway, he saw something that made him hesitate. A woman stood at the side of the road, her back to the traffic, drenched from head to toe. She wasn't facing him, just staring into the woods beside the highway. Her long black hair clung to her face and shoulders, the hem of her dress dripping onto the asphalt. There was something unsettling about her stillness. Mason's fingers tightened around the wheel as he passed. His foot hovered over the brake. He didn't believe in ghosts, but the way she stood there, it wasn't right. The part of his brain that screamed, "Keep driving," was drowned out by something else. He stopped. When he looked in the rearview mirror, she hadn't moved, just stood there, back turned, her soaked form barely visible in the dark. The air inside the car thickened as the passenger door opened. Dampness seeped into the fabric, the faint scent of wet earth clinging to every surface. A slow, deliberate movement followed, something heavy settling into the seat. Water dripped onto the floor mat, pooling beneath bare feet. The engine hummed beneath Mason's grip, the wipers dragging across the windshield in a slow, rhythmic squeak. The rain outside intensified, hammering against the glass. The passenger remained still, head bowed, fingers twitching slightly in her lap. A tightening sensation crawled up Mason's arms, his breath slowing despite the thudding in his chest. The road stretched ahead, empty, the white lines blurring in the downpour. He focused on the drive, on the highway signs barely visible in the storm. The GPS screen flickered. The radio let out a burst of static before cutting to silence. A whisper curled around the space between them, faint yet clear. A warning, too soft to grasp entirely, yet pressing against his senses like a cold hand on his skin. The road curved sharply ahead. The headlights carved a narrow path through the dark, illuminating only slick pavement and an endless stretch of trees. Something in the air felt wrong, as if the car had veered off course without him realizing it. A shift in weight, not a movement, not a sound, just an overwhelming awareness that the passenger was no longer still. The rearview mirror reflected something blurred, something twisted, a shape that hadn't been there moments ago. The edges of its face stretched too far, its mouth splitting wide, teeth jagged and uneven. Hollow eyes bore into him through the glass. The car jolted as cold fingers curled around the wheel, guiding it sharply. Mason fought back, muscles locking as the tires screeched against the wet asphalt. The hands pressed harder, forcing the car toward the shoulder, toward the trees looming beyond the guardrail. A surge of air rushed through the cabin as the weight vanished. The wheel loosened under Mason's grip, and the vehicle swerved wildly before skidding to a halt at the roadside. The passenger seat was empty. Rain pounded against the roof, water trickling down the fogged windows. The imprint of a body lingered on the fabric, the seatbelt still fastened. The scent of damp earth clung to the air, thick and suffocating. Mason's chest heaved as he reached for his phone, fingers trembling. No service. The mirror, clouded with mist, reflected something inches from his face. Something pale, sunken, watching. A final whisper coiled around him, its meaning undeniable this time. Wrong way. The car lurched forward. The headlights caught the jagged break in the guardrail just before the world spun. A flash of movement, a sickening drop, and then nothing. 2 days later, Highway Patrol found Mason's car at the bottom of a ravine. The wreckage lay twisted beneath the broken trees, shattered glass reflecting the dull light of morning. The driver's seat was empty, the windshield cracked from the impact. But the passenger seat? The seatbelt was still fastened, and the imprint of a body remained in the waterlogged cushion. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying stories. Hit the bell icon to never miss an upload. Stay safe, stay aware, and remember, some stories are more than just stories.